Well, Dr. Carmichael, appreciate you coming and letting us interview you today.
Sure.
And I just wanted to start by talking a little bit, or asking you to talk a little bit about your background, since you came from South Georgia instead of from the Ackworth area. Talk about growing up in Tifton.
Sure. So Tifton was a small town back then. Diner downtown, movie theater that had recently closed, kind of what you see with all the small towns that had happened during the time. Yep, I grew up there. I was born in '68, so I grew up there until I moved off to college back in '88. So, my grandfather knew everybody in town. We had a parts store in town and a farm. So I grew up through 4-H doing showing steers, showing hogs and sheep. So I grew up very much on the farm, but at the same time we lived across town, and I was pretty much a city boy, as much as you could be in that small town.
Mm-hmm.
So from there I kind of changed and moved to Athens, and then spent 5 years there, and then moved to Connecticut for a year and came back to Ackworth.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or you came to Ackworth.
Came to Ackworth. Yes, I did.
Let's talk, before we get to Ackworth, well, maybe I should just ask you, how would Tifton back then compared to Ackworth when you got here in the 90s?
It was very much similar, just on a bigger scale, and I never would have thought that Tifton was considered a big town, but as far as the downtown proper, Tifton was it was almost double the size of downtown Ackworth. And as far as businesses, whenever I got here, there was only a couple of viable businesses in the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of happening in Tifton at the time whenever I left, that we were seeing businesses close as your small town department stores and different things were being kind of taken over by the big box stores.
Mm-hmm.
So I very much felt like it was the same, just on a smaller scale, which was, I never would have thought that I was moving to a smaller town, but it was interesting just seeing how this little niche town right outside of Atlanta, that was just this hidden gem that was just quiet and it seemed like nobody knew about, but you could get right into downtown Atlanta in no time flat. So.
You also went to Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College. What did you major in when you went there?
So I did a pre-vet major, and so that allowed me the opportunity once I got to Georgia to complete one more year of undergrad. So after 3 years of undergrad, I was able to get in early to vet school. Mm-hmm. After completing my first year of vet school, I could then applied and was awarded a bachelor's of agriculture. Mm-hmm. So that was what my undergrad degree was. Finished out 3 more years of vet school and graduated in '93.
So vet school's 4 years? Then.
Vet school's 4 years.
Yeah. Was it a shock going to Athens after Tifton? Or?
It very much was. It was, a lot more people, a lot more hustle and bustle. I was very much, I'd been exposed whenever I was in 4-H to be able and afforded the opportunities to go to different towns, but never experienced living in a town that was that busy and that congested. Even looking back now, it really wasn't that congested. It was just a college town.
Maybe it's obvious now, but when did you first know you wanted to be a veterinarian?
Crazy as it sounds, it's what I've always wanted to do. I knew that if I wasn't a veterinarian, I wanted to be a 4-H county agent, so I could work with 4-Hers, because I had a big influence with several people growing up with that. And then if not, then I was going to be a teacher. That was going to be my next step. So I did have my backup plans, but for some reason, and it was, I never thought of it as a career. It was just something I thought that I would do. I had a great respect for our veterinarians in Tifton at the time, and just thought that's what I was meant to be.
I know up until not too many years ago, 4-H clubs were still big in parts of Cobb County at least. Talk about that a little bit. How did the 4-H movement affect you?
So 4-H not only did the farm animals, which everybody kind of knew from the 50s and 60s whenever it was getting started, but they had a lot of different leadership programs as well. So by following in some of those programs, I was able to be a little more of an effective leader as I am today, trying to run a business and handle employees. So as we look back, there were several things, the different programs, even just being able to do public speaking and being able to be comfortable standing up at an awards banquet, to be able to practice. Being in 4-H afforded me the more chances to meet with people that were, with Georgia Power, some of their higher ups, things that I would never have been exposed to just growing up in Tifton and then even going to college. So I was able to see kind of what corporate America was, as well as then being able to enjoy the small rural town America at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So 4-H got me a trip to Chicago, which, South Georgia boy in high school and going to Chicago was quite an interesting trip. So.
And so at the University of Georgia, I think I saw somewhere that you kind of specialized in surgery to some degree, or can you explain that?
Sure. So in veterinary medicine, when you graduate, you are and pass your boards, and you're licensed to be able to do surgery in small animals, dogs, cats, and large animals, and even pocket pets, et cetera. So over the first few years that after graduation, most people tend to kind of lean to or develop special interest in different areas, whether or not it's medicine or surgery. I got a chance to be able to go to West Hartford, Connecticut, and work with a referral hospital that did a lot of surgeries, did a lot of internal medicine. And while I'm not board certified, I knew that they could do things in a converted dairy barn. It was there right outside of West Hartford. They took a dairy barn and converted it into a specialty hospital. And I figured if they could do that, then we could do that here in Ackworth whenever I came back.
A dairy barn into a specialty hospital?
Into a specialty hospital.
That must have taken a lot of conversion.
It did. They took the stanchions and folded them over and put cages on top of them. They built part of the milking parlor as their surgery area. I mean, walking into it, you'd have had no idea that it was a dairy barn, but looking back at the history of the building, it was a dairy farm, and the town had bought the dairy farm to put a high school directly behind it. So. But I knew if they could do it there, and so I came to Ackworth and just really developed a special interest in surgery, being able to try and help people that, at the time we didn't have many specialists that they could go to. So there were a lot of surgeries that we did just out of necessity because there wasn't anybody else that could do it. And now it's just more of a passion, just being able to try and help people out that may not be able to afford to go someplace.
So you go to Connecticut because of the surgery and spent a year there. What was the weather like during that year?
So, South Georgia boy, I remember in elementary school that it got so cold for 3 days that the heat couldn't even keep up in Tifton, and we had rare snow. When I got to Connecticut, they told me at the end of the year that it was the most snow they had had in 100 years. So I'd never experienced anything like that. I'd been snow skiing before and seen snow, but I'd never actually lived in snow. So it was quite an experience.
So you knew you didn't want to live in snow anymore.
I knew I did not want to live in snow. I did not want to shovel snow. That was not a fun experience.
Before we move on to Ackworth, it might be worthwhile just to talk for a minute about something that no one knows about you in Ackworth that you did when you were in high school and in junior college as well.
Yep. So I was a clogger. So we in high school, and then once I got to ABAC, I was part of the clogging team, and we would go around the state doing different performances at fairs and different events. So, but I was considered an ABAC clogger. So.
Okay. You still do any clogging now?
Only at the occasional wedding. Somebody will play Rocky Top or Orange Blossom Special, and you'll get a few people out clogging. So it's kind of interesting to see who knows how to do it and gets out.
Okay. Well, what brought you to Ackworth? How did you even find out that there was an Ackworth?
The company that I came to work for and then later became partners of hired me as a veterinarian. And so I started in Ackworth. I fully expected that I'd be here 2 years. I was warned when we graduated from vet school that most people would spend 2 years working for a place, and then they'd move on and find another vet clinic that may better suit their needs.
Yeah.
But when I got here, I just fell in love with the town and the people, and I decided that I wasn't going to leave, that I stayed here, and eventually bought in and became part owner of the business itself.
So you are probably thinking, well, I'll go anywhere in Georgia that has a job, and this was the one that looked the best to you?
Well, I had actually interviewed in 5 different states and was offered positions in 5 different states. I was just going to try and come to the Southeast, but there was something about the town and just kind of made me feel like I was at home. So it just, and there were a lot of my friends from vet school that were in the Atlanta area. So after living in New England, everything was about an hour away. I figured everything around Atlanta was about an hour away, so I could go and see people as I needed to.
So you're applying everywhere, and Ackworth Animal Hospital is looking for somebody, and they offer you the job, and you come.
I did. That's where it all started.
Talk about Ackworth Animal Hospital.
It's a real small clinic. Whenever I first got there, it was really just a satellite clinic where main surgeries, any really difficult cases got shipped to our main hospital, which was Bartow Animal Hospital in Cartersville. But once I got there and realized that, if they could do good medicine in that converted dairy barn and had people referring from all over with board certified specialists, we should be able to do that in that small building. It's a converted old mill house, which provided a sense of hominess and comfort level for a lot of people, that even once we opened our new clinic over on 41, that people would still come back to that small little clinic because they just felt at home. It was, the building's got hand-hewn timbers underneath the exam rooms, so it's definitely has been there for a while.
When you say a mill house, the kind that the workers were living in?
They're with the old cotton mill, or that was there. I guess it was not the unique as the one that was up on Main Street. So, but the cotton mill that's right there next to the railroad tracks.
Yeah, where the restaurant is now. Yeah. And so, okay, so it's how many rooms were in the building?
So it's just a 2 exam room clinic, and so then there's a surgery room, a treatment room, X-ray, an office, and a little reception area. So in the grand scheme of things, it's considered a pretty small clinic, but with the help of the community and with other good veterinarians that were there, we were able to take that small little clinic and turn it into something that really became a referral place that a lot of people would send their animals, or other veterinary clinics would send things to us to be able to take care of.
How many vets were there?
We typically run 2 vets at that clinic at a time. And
when you came, you were the second one?
When I came, the other veterinarian that was there left shortly afterwards. He moved back to his hometown in Louisiana, and so it was just me there running it for several years. And then we hired another veterinarian that came in to help, and so it just continued to grow from there.
Now, did the connection with Bartow Animal Hospital continue?
It did. Once I eventually bought in, and then we built the Lake City Animal Hospital. Then we had 3 clinics in our group. So we eventually, by the time we finished up with that partnership, there's 5 of us that were partners, and we owned 3 clinics.
And so how long did it take before you became a partner?
I think I started working there in '94, and I bought in somewhere in '98, '99.
Not long.
Not long. I decided I wanted to stay here, so I wanted to be invested if I was going to stay here.
Yeah. Okay, so Lake City Animal Hospital starts 2001?
Yes.
And so that's, what, 5, 6 years after you get here? You got here in '94?
'94, so,
Okay.
so 7 years later we opened the other
7 years
clinic.
Okay. And so the 3 clinics, and then I think you said just recently you've gotten out of it or sold out?
We sold the business aspect of it. I'm still working, so I still like to do my surgeries. So I'm there a few days a week now, as opposed to whenever I started doing 60 hours a week. So it's a little bit of a cutback.
It was
but
60 hours a week when you started?
when I started, it was all night
You were
doing.
the only one.
It was emergency calls. We didn't have emergency vet clinics back then that people could easily get to. So we were on call for any of those cases. So we used to do large animal work too. And so, it was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd get the call to go take care of a large animal. And then it was tough because then you had to get to work the next morning by 8 o'clock to start seeing the small animal patients again. So it was.
So dogs and cats in the daytime, but you might have to go out in the middle of the night if somebody had a cow that got sick or whatever. Horse.
And if anybody had a sick dog or cat, in the middle of the night, we'd come in and take care of them too. That was when you're young and can handle that, right? Live on just a few hours sleep.
Yeah. Okay, and so you liked Ackworth. You decide you're going to stay here, but I think you've said before that Ackworth in the 90s was a far cry from where it is today, maybe. Can you talk about what Ackworth was like downtown when you got here?
So it's been said that back in the early 90s, you could throw a rock from one end of Main Street to the other and not hit a car. So there was really not much that was actually happening. You could hear the traffic light click. It was the old style traffic light. You could actually hear the switch on the inside of it, that it was so quiet downtown. So it's definitely changed. By being part of the community, I was ended up being on planning and zoning, and that allowed me to kind of see and to monitor and help some of the growth that we've seen and the changes that we've seen over the last 20 plus years.
I wanted to ask you about that. You were on planning and zoning a long time. You must have gotten on there about the time that you opened up the Lake City Animal Hospital, I guess.
Yes, just before. Yep.
So 2001.
Somewhere in that. The timeline gets real fuzzy as far as when it actually started, and I've tried to find records, and I can't, don't know the actual date we first started, but.
Sometime early in the 21st century.
Sometime.
Okay. You got on, and how did that come about? Did somebody ask you to be on it, or get appointed to it? How does that work?
So it's an appointed position, and so I think I was actually approached by Ben Flanagan, who was the chairman at the time, because I was a new homeowner in the downtown area, so you needed to be a city resident to be on that, and so being a business owner and being part of the community and trying to do things in the community, he thought that may be a good fit. So then I was appointed by the board of aldermen at the time. So, and I guess they thought I did a good job. They kept me on for a while.
Okay, so I think you said that you bought a house in '95, maybe.
So my first house I bought in '95, but it was just outside the city limits. So
which way outside?
Towards Paulding County. So right at the Paulding Bartow Cobb corner. So, but in the Paulding County. And in the house that I'm currently in now, I think I ended up buying that in '96, and I've been there ever since. So.
Okay. So I thought I saw '99 somewhere on that second house.
And it may be. Maybe it was '99. I mean, that was a long
time ago.
Oh, actually it was '99 because at the time I'd gotten married in '96. I'd sold the house that I originally had, and then found this house. This house was actually was built in the '60s, and one of our local pharmacists had actually lived in it at the time, but it was the grandparents of one of my employees that she was selling the house, and so it was '99 when I actually bought the house.
So you've got a 1960s house.
A 1960s. It's been changed a little bit since then, so you wouldn't recognize it as a '60s house, but it's grown with the times, grown with the family.
Lots of ranch houses were built in the '60s. What style was this one?
Yep, absolutely, a 3-2 brick ranch. So.
And you've added to it, or?
Added to it and updated it. So you wouldn't know it was built in the 60s whenever you go in, other than it still got its formal living room. So where nowadays you may not necessarily see that.
Okay, okay. So, you, you were on planning and zoning for 20 years. Ben, you mentioned Ben Flanagan. I might just ask you to talk a little bit about some of the people that had an influence on you. And I know you had listed Ben Flanagan as one of them.
Yep, Ben, and just his love of the community and being able to say, you know, he's here and been here, you know, his whole life, but the fact that he still wants to be part of it and continue to watch the city grow. Then there were people like Butch Price, you know, very understated, very smart man, that whenever he spoke, you listened, because he really had a lot of he still does, a lot of good wisdom. But just to be able to see the commitment that they had, the work behind the scenes. Mayor Alligood, same thing, came to town, fell in love with the town, and they just really wanted to see the town grow. So people like that. There's folks like Abby Parks, you know, with her love of history. I was interested in history, but I don't think I really understood history. I didn't like it in college, I can tell you that, you know. But, you know, once she kind of gets you hooked into the passion of the history of the town, then you really start to understand and see, you know, why we need to preserve so many of the things that we do have, that we're actually lucky enough to have in our small little town.
Yeah, I think sometimes the way we teach history turns people off that really love history. They just don't know it sometimes.
History was interesting, but I rode the curve to be able to pass. I can say that.
Okay. But I think, ultimately, at any rate, focusing on the local, focus on things that people are actually experiencing and see can make a big difference.
I agree.
So, okay, so let's see, Butch Price was on the Board of Aldermen until this year. Are you taking his seat?
I did, yep. Once he retired, then I ran this year to take his seat.
And he'd been on forever.
It seems like it. I think he was 30 years. So, yes, he's been around. He's been a fixture.
Yeah. And so you've got the Butch Price seat.
Yep. That's some big shoes to fill.
I'd say. All right. Anybody else that, in terms of local leadership, or these are those on the government and on the planning and zoning, I guess?
Yeah, well, our local principals that we had at the time made a big impact just in trying to, you know, help me take care of children, and you know, so being part of the school system, and you know, I ended up volunteering with the PTA, which, you know, PTA is always been kind of more of a female-oriented thing, especially with our group. So I was really the only male that was part of it. We actually had started a program with some of the other dads at Ackworth Elementary and McCall, where it's called Watchdogs, Dads of Great Students. And it was all about parental involvement and getting more fatherly figures. So we'd have dads come in and volunteer for the day. It was a great experience to be able to see there would be families where there may not be a father, but a neighbor came in and would be the father of those children for the day. So it really was an interesting experience, being able to see the dynamics and how just actually having a parental figure of some sort could just make a big difference in those kids' days whenever they were there.
You were saying before we started that DOGS is a national organization?
It is a national organization. So it was, they start off with a pizza night, and then we would do donuts for dads and do different things to try and encourage parents to come. You know, it was great. I could have construction workers that if it was raining, they'd call me up the morning of and say, I've got a chance to volunteer today. Where can I go? So I had some wonderful teachers that I worked with that would just love to have a dad of any sort come into their classroom. So we'd put them on a schedule and put them to work.
And I think I've seen that you said your daughter's graduated from West Georgia, and your son's at Kennesaw State.
Yes. So my daughter's now doing the RN residency program in the ER department at Grady. And then my son's doing professional sales at KSU.
Well, they can support you in your old age.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay. So planning and zoning, what did you learn on planning and zoning that you think carries over to your new job as a member of the Board of Aldermen?
So I think part of it is just this whole long-term planning and vision that the city has, working on the comprehensive plan map, looking at how zoning affects the residents, how it affects, businesses, and being able to see how all of that intertwines and the nuances of it. So as I learned early on in watching as the dynamics changed, and the city needs to be fluid as well. And that we can't necessarily make it, very staunch, this area has to be X, Y, or Z, because that may not be what the growth of the city is asking. And so being able to be flexible with that and be able to grow with the times and to understand that maybe even sometimes the size of our houses, where, we went from one size to grow to another size, and now some of the newer, younger generation are looking for much smaller houses. And how does the city of Ackworth grow with that time? How do we grow with the idea of trying to make sure that we can have a work, live, play neighborhood? How do we, maintain our quality of life? On planning and zoning, we were able to kind of watch that happen, and how do we keep and protect our areas like our lakes and our different green spaces, and then how does that carry over into being the alderman and making sure that we're following suit with that. So
I think you said in your campaign literature that you were going to take a pragmatic approach toward zoning, and depending on, not every project is necessarily a good one for Ackworth.
That's
deciding which ones are.
And that's the thing, is that we need to have controlled growth. If we don't grow, we die, and then we end up back just like we were in the early 90s, where we're struggling to try and keep a business, but because of the way we've done things and been smart, and the leadership that we've had over the years in being smart with that growth, now we've got people fighting to try and get into an empty space. So as soon as something opens up, there are people that are struggling, they want to be on Main Street, they want to be in our downtown area to be able to do their business and provide a livelihood for their families.
Yeah, I think Ackworth's a great story of how the downtown has sprung back into, I guess, full occupation again in the last 20 years. Surely planning and zoning was involved in all of that. Can you tell some of those stories of how the downtown came back?
Well, I think it was all with the leadership at the time, and even providing tax incentives sometimes in certain cases. But being able to, as a planning and zoning, look and say, well, this particular commercial piece of property abuts a residential, and we need to protect the residents. And that's what the idea of trying to keep our city in our controlled growth, and not to be able to just have kind of an urban sprawl. So I think that growth of being able to just making sure that we look at each individual case and make sure we're using the best use of that piece of property.
I know in your campaign literature you talked about parks, and Ackworth to me just has an amazing amount of parkland compared to most towns its size. But you were talking about some places that maybe don't have as many parks as other parts of town. Where you think, could you talk about that a little bit? Where you think there might be an opportunity to expand parks and recreation?
Well, I think anytime that we've got the opportunity to look at a piece of property that may be vacant or coming vacant, if we can turn that into a green space that fits within the community and the parks system, then it kind of makes sense. And I think we just need to be on the lookout for it. The city's working on trying to complete a trail around the lake right now, and that's going to be a big project. So that's going to take some time and effort, and be able to try and get that to happen. I do think, with the current parks that we do have, and the way that the different the playground equipment is designed to try and build strength and to build character rather than, super safe. It's kind of allowing the kids to experiment and to try and reach some boundaries. So, there's been a lot of thought process that goes into that. So anytime that we get an opportunity to see, a lot that may come open, could that be a park, a pocket park, an opportunity? I think we just need to be aware of it and start trying to incorporate that as best we can.
I think you mentioned some places like Baker Road
And just trying to be
Highway
careful on all
92.
that growth, and if we can, help to, there's certain places that may need some revitalization, and I think that just means we need to pay more attention to it. And, and how can the city be proactive in trying to, keep those areas viable?
Yeah, and I think you've said something very similar about, with regard to supporting entrepreneurs, that maybe there are some parts that outlying businesses
That need help because they're not in the main district. So how do we encourage people to go outside of it? I've gotten very spoiled living here in Ackworth. I can have a 3-mile radius and get anything that I need. So, how do we, for these businesses that may be on the edge of that radius, for some of our citizens, how do we encourage people to go there?